The night the choir sang, the garage door closed, and the woman my father married raised her hand. He only said, "Not now," a year later, when that choir sang that same song. All the secrets she kept surfaced, right in the middle of the perfect lights and melodies. This is not a warm Christmas story. This is the story of how I made the whole town listen to the truth they tried to bury. My name is Kaylee Johnston. I am 31 years old, and I am an audio engineer at Oralis Systems. At Oralis, my job is precision. I design the acoustic architecture for spaces where clarity is paramount: boardrooms, concert halls, and interrogation rooms. I spend my days filtering signal from noise, finding the single corrupt frequency that ruins the entire composition, and eliminating it. I hunt for echoes, for phantom reverberations, for the lies sound tells. It is a methodical, passionless job, and I am very, very good at it. This job is in a city 200 miles away from Rivermont, the town where I grew up. I left Rivermont a decade ago and never truly looked back, except for the obligatory annual pilgrimage that is Christmas. This year was no different. I drove my rented sedan down the familiar, overly decorated Main Street, past the town square's nativity scene, to my father's house, the house that now belonged, in every way that mattered, to Lila Revenge Johnston. I was back to lend my expertise to the Rivermont Community Church's annual Christmas Eve choir performance. It was a tradition. In this town, tradition is a kind of armor, a shield against anything new or uncomfortable. I used to sing in that choir. Now, I was just there to make sure the microphones didn't feedback. Lila greeted me at the door with a smile that was all porcelain and angles. She was perfect. As always, her silver blonde hair in a flawless chignon, her cream-colored cashmere sweater unstained by the frantic cooking I could smell from the kitchen. Lila is a woman who moves through life without ever creating a wake. She glides, she directs, she acquires. She had acquired my father, Harold Johnston, 5 years after my mother died, and with him, the house, the family name, and the Johnston Family Fund. "Kaylee, darling," she said, her voice like wind chimes, cold and high. "You made it. We're just desperate for more candles for the entryway. The ones I ordered were simply the wrong shade of ivory. Be a dear and check the garage, in the old storage bins." The old storage bins, my mother's storage bins. It was a command disguised as a request. I nodded, my audio engineer's brain already calculating the acoustic properties of the forced cheer in her voice. It was brittle, with a tight, unpleasant resonance around the 2 kilohertz mark. I left the warmth of the living room, the scent of pine and simmering cider, and opened the door to the garage. The cold hit me instantly. It was a damp, concrete cold that smelled of oil, old tires, and mildew. The house was attached to the church by a long, covered walkway, and the sound of the choir rehearsing filtered through the walls, a faint, angelic murmur beneath the sharp, a rhythmic ticking of sleet against the metal garage door. I pulled the string for the bare bulb overhead. It cast weak, yellow light over stacks of plastic containers. Lila's meticulous, labeled bins were on new metal shelves. My mother's things were stacked in the far corner, covered in a dusty tarp. I heard the door from the kitchen open and close behind me. Lila. She didn't bother with the darling this time. "I do hope this isn't going to be a difficult visit. Kaylee?" I kept my back to her, pulling at the lid of a bin marked "Seasonal, Miss." "Just getting the candles, Lila." "Are you?" she said. The sound of the sleet grew louder, a sudden angry rattling. "Or are you brooding? I heard from the committee that you were disappointed to be removed from the fund's organizing board this year." I stopped. The plastic lid was cold under my fingers. The fund was the Rivermont Youth and Arts Fund. Started by my mother, Lila now ran it. I had been on the board, quietly, until 3 weeks ago, when I had been politely and formally voted off, replaced by one of Lila's friends. I turned around slowly. She was standing with her arms crossed, her perfect cashmere silhouette framed against the kitchen light. I was disappointed that you're redirecting the funds from the youth music program to your Winterline Partners consulting group, Lila. That's what I was. Her smile didn't falter, but it tightened. That is a business decision. Something you, with your little hobby in wires, wouldn't understand. The fund needs professional guidance to grow. My little hobby is a six-figure job, Lila, and it taught me to spot a bad feedback loop. You're paying yourself to advise yourself. It's corrupt. The word hung in the cold air. The choir's muffled voices swelled, a harmony I couldn't quite place. Lila took 2 steps toward me. The bare bulb lit the planes of her face, casting shadows under her sharp cheekbones. "You are just like your mother," she whispered, and it was not a compliment. "Always so emotional, always trying to cause a scene. You think you can come back here and make accusations? You think you can cast a shadow on my Christmas, on what I've built?" "What you've stolen," I said, my voice as cold as the concrete floor. "This fund, this house, even her Christmas decorations," I gestured to the bin. "You sent me down here to find her things." Lila's face, for the first time, lost its perfect composure. It became something ugly, something sharp and real. "You," she hissed, "are nothing, a bitter little girl playing with microphones." And then she raised her hand. It wasn't a movie slap. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a cold, precise, open-palmed strike that cracked across my cheek with the flat, dead sound of an acoustic panel absorbing an impact. It was all wrist, and it was fast. My head snapped to the side. A sharp, metallic taste filled my mouth. The sleet on the door sounded like 1,000 tiny hammers. In the ringing silence that followed, I heard a click. The main garage door, the heavy one that faced the driveway, was rolling open. A rectangle of watery gray light flooded the space, silhouetting us both. My father, Harold Johnston, stood there, holding the remote. He was wearing his good wool coat, ready for the service. He froze. He saw me, holding my face. He saw Lila, her hand still slightly raised, her chest heaving. His eyes darted between us. I could see the calculation, the desperate flowchart of marital politics running behind his gaze. He saw the vivid red mark blooming on my 31-year-old daughter's face. I waited. The entire world seemed to pause, waiting for him to be a father. He looked at my cheek. He looked at his wife. He looked at the floor. Then he cleared his throat, a small, dry sound. "Not now," he said, so quietly I barely heard him over the choir. "Lila, we have to be at the church in 10 minutes. Please, not now." Not now. Not, "What did you do?" Not, "Are you okay, Kaylee?" Not, "How dare you?" Just, not now. The social inconvenience. The interruption of the schedule. Lila's transformation was immediate. The rage vanished. The mask of the gracious hostess slid back into place. She smoothed the front of her sweater, took a deep, centering breath, and turned to him. "Of course, Harold, I was just helping Kaylee find the candles. She's being a bit emotional." She cast a cold glance back at me. "Don't ruin the holiday spirit. Kaylee, come inside when you're composed." She glided past him, out of the garage, into the warm house. My father lingered for one more second. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just gave a helpless little shrug, a gesture of complete and total surrender. And then he pulled the remote. The heavy door groaned and began to slide shut, plunging the garage back into near darkness, leaving me with the smell of oil and the single bare bulb. I stood there for a long time. The only sound was the sleet in the choir, which was now clear and high, swelling with the full force of the season. "Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel." The voices were beautiful, perfectly mixed, the sopranos hitting their high C with bell-like clarity, and it sounded like a threat, a mockery. "Rejoice." I bent down. A single white candle had fallen from the bin when I'd turned. It had rolled across the dusty floor. A piece of the wax, brittle from the cold, had chipped off. It looked like a broken tooth. My belief in him, in the idea of family or home in this house, chipped off just as cleanly. It was gone. I didn't go back inside. I walked to the side door, into the sleet, and got into my car. The cold vinyl of the seat was a shock, but I welcomed it. I turned the ignition, but not the engine, just enough to power the interior lights. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My cheek was a bright, angry red, a perfect handprint, but my eyes were the chilling part. They weren't sad. They weren't tearful. They were cold. They were the eyes of an engineer who had just found the critical fault in the system, the noise that had been muddying the signal for years. My father's "not now," Lila's "don't ruin the holiday." The entire system was corrupt, and I knew, with the same certainty that I know a 30 hertz hum means a ground loop, exactly what I had to do. I pulled out my phone. The screen was painfully bright. I opened a new message, addressed to myself. My fingers were steady, almost numb. I typed one sentence. From now on, everything gets recorded. I drove back to my apartment that night, a 3-hour drive through the freezing sleet. I didn't play any music. I just listened to the rhythmic slap of the windshield wipers, counting the beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, a steady, predictable tempo. When I got home at 2 in the morning, I didn't sleep. I turned on every light in my sterile, minimalist living room. I took my high-resolution DSLR camera, the one I use for documenting acoustic installations, and set it on a tripod. I angled my desk lamp to provide flat, clinical light. Then, I photographed my face from 6 different angles. The red handprint had deepened to a mottled purple, a clear, distinct outline of 4 fingers and a thumb. I imported the images into my secure server, labeling the file Event Data 1224. Then I sat at my laptop and began to write. I wrote like I was composing a post-incident report for a catastrophic system failure at Oralis. Time, approximately 7:30 p.m. Location, garage. Johnston residence, Rivermont. Parties present. Lila Renwick Johnston. Kaylee Johnston. Witness, Harold Johnston. I detailed the conversation, the accusations about the fund, her exact words. Bitter little girl playing with microphones. I described the strike, its physical force, the sound it made, the ringing in my left ear. And I wrote his words, "Not now." I saved the document as a time-stamped, encrypted PDF. The next morning, Christmas Day, I did not call my father. I drove to the city police precinct. I filed an informational report. The desk sergeant, chewing on a piece of gum, looked bored. "So you don't want to press charges against your stepmother?" he asked, skeptical. "No," I said, my voice flat. "I just want this report on file. I want an official record that this event occurred on this date. Here are the photographs." I handed him a sealed envelope. He looked at the top photo, raised an eyebrow, and stamped the report. "Informational only," he said. I took my copy of the paperwork and left. It was step 1. Create a baseline. Establish the data point. I went back to work at Oralis Systems 2 days later. The office was empty. A ghost town of ergonomic chairs and dark monitors. I told my supervisor I was starting preliminary research for a new pro bono initiative. "I'm exploring how Oralis can help nonprofits," I said. "Specifically looking at their data management and financial transparency systems. I want to build a proposal for a secure donation tracking platform." He loved it. "Great initiative. Johnston, use all the R&D time you need." I used Oralis's powerful servers, not to build a system, but to tear one apart. My research was a deep dive into the architecture of financial databases, offshore data havens, and the legal structures of shell corporations. I studied how money is moved, how it's hidden, and how it's cleaned. My work as an audio engineer is about finding patterns in chaos. This was no different. I was just hunting a different kind of signal. I started with the Rivermont Youth and Arts Fund. It was a public charity, so its basic filings were available, but Lila ran it like a private kingdom. The public reports were vague. full of marketing language about community engagement and artistic outreach, but the numbers were opaque. I needed the raw data. I used my research project as cover to access specialized databases that track vendor registrations and corporate filings. I began cross-referencing the fund's few declared expenses with state business records. It took me 3 weeks to find the first thread. A vendor listed as North Pine Productions. The fund had paid North Pine Productions over $60,000 in the last year for event staging and lighting. I ran a search. North Pine Productions did not exist. There was no website, no business license, no tax ID. The address listed was a UPS store mailbox in a strip mall 2 towns over from Rivermont. My heart didn't race. It just felt cold, calibrated. I kept digging. I found more. Duplicate invoices, paid weeks apart, for the same line item. Acoustic consulting. Seasonal decorations. Program printing. They were small enough to fly under a lazy auditor's radar. 2,000 here, 5,000 there, but they added up. Then I found Winterline Partners. This one was different. This one was a registered LLC. It wasn't a phantom, it was a shell. It had been paid a quarterly consulting fee of $25,000. The fund's entire purpose was to support youth music, and it was spending $100,000 a year on advice. I pulled the corporate registration for Winterline Partners. The listed agent, the sole proprietor, was not Lila. It was an advisory group I'd never heard of. But my engineer's mind hates an unsolved variable. I ran the advisory group's name through a deeper legal search, tracing its ownership back, and back again, through 2 more layers of incorporation. And there it was, the parent company. Renwick Advisory, Lila's maiden name. I printed everything, the invoices, the corporate charts, the bank routing numbers I'd managed to find linked to the phantom accounts. I went to an art supply store and bought the largest foam core board they had. I pinned it to the wall of my sparse apartment. I started drawing lines with a red marker. The fund, aligned to North Pine, aligned to the duplicate invoices, aligned to Winterline Partners, and from Winterline, a thick red line to Renwick Advisory. It was a beautifully simple, elegant system of theft, a perfect feedback loop. The fund's donations went in, and Lila's consulting fees came out. The anger I felt was not hot. It was a cold, quiet pressure, a rising hum at a frequency just below hearing. It was the anger of finding a critical design flaw. I needed verification. I needed a human source. I called Mara Albright. We had been friends in high school, back before I left Rivermont. She had stayed. She was now the lead investigative reporter for the Elm Street Ledger, the local paper that everyone read and nobody took seriously, but Mara was sharp, and she hated the Rivermont elite. "Kaylee Johnston," she answered, her voice skeptical. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Calling to complain about a typo in the police blotter?" "I've got a story for you, Mara," I said. "A real one. It's about the Youth and Arts Fund." I sent her my encrypted file. She called me back 30 minutes later. Her voice was different. "My God, Kaylee, are you sure? This is Lila. This is Lila." "I'm sure the invoices are real," I said. "I need you to verify the vendor addresses. I need you to see who cashes the checks, quietly." "Quietly is my middle name," she said. The hunt was on. While Mara dug into the paper trail, I went after the audio. I still had administrative access to the church's tech systems. I had installed that mixing board myself 3 years ago. I'd built in a feature I always build in, a redundant, multi-track backup. Everything that goes through the board, every microphone, every input, is recorded and saved to a hidden, partitioned drive. It saves automatically, time-stamped. I logged in remotely. I navigated to the archives folder, and there it was. Christmas Eve service backup. Last year. I downloaded the 40-gigabyte file. It was a clean 24-track recording. I isolated the choir mics, the pastor's mic, the ambient room mics, and I isolated the microphone on the lectern, the one Lila used for her welcome and gratitude speech. I fast-forwarded through her bland, rehearsed speech. I kept listening, and I found it. It was after the choir had finished, when she thought the microphones were off, but the system was still live. She was speaking to someone near the lectern, one of her committee friends, maybe my father. Her voice was low, but the gain on that mic was high. A woman's voice murmured something I couldn't catch, and then Lila laughed. It was not her high, wind chime laugh. This was a low, throaty, deeply satisfied sound. "Don't worry," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "The children get their new sheet music, but there's always a bonus for those who know how to pivot." Pivot, the same word she'd used for her consulting group, the same word she'd used to justify removing me from the board. I isolated the audio clip, I ran it through a filter at Oralis, cleaning up the background noise, amplifying her voice until it was crystal clear, undeniable. I saved it as Pivot Bonus, Wave. This was no longer just about a slap in a garage. That was just the catalyst, the event that forced me to look. This was about a systemic, arrogant, and ongoing crime. She was stealing from children, from my mother's legacy, and using the town's goodwill as her shield. Mara called back a week later. "It's all true," she said, her voice tight with fury. "The UPS mailbox, the phantom vendors, and Renwick Advisory, it's registered to her, not just her name, it's her. She's stealing them blind. Kaylee." I began my next phase. I used a private investigator, paid with my own money, to legally install a video camera in the public access conference room at the community center where the fund held its monthly board meetings. It was a legal recording. The room was marked, "This space is subject to monitoring." I watched the meetings for 6 months. I watched Lila charm, deflect, and bully. I watched her push through the Winterline Partners payment every quarter, calling it essential administrative overhead. I watched my father sit in the corner at one meeting, looking at his phone, completely checked out. I gathered my data, the audio clip, the video recordings, the financial flowchart, the informational police report, the photographs of my face. I opened a new document, a project plan. I set deliverables, milestones, and a final go-live date. I bought a new notebook, a simple, black-covered one. I opened it to the first page. I wrote down the date, December 24th, this year. The event, Rivermont Community Church, Christmas Eve Gala. The title, Day of Reckoning. I was an audio engineer. I was going to remove the noise from the system. I was going to make them all hear the truth, in perfect, terrifying clarity. I drove back to Rivermont on a Saturday in mid-November. The air was crisp and smelled of wood smoke. The town was already dressing itself for the holidays, stringing up lights that looked weak and tinny in the daylight. I wasn't carrying recording equipment. I wasn't carrying a project plan. I was carrying a warm apple pie, bought from the best bakery in my city. It was wrapped in a simple brown box, a peace offering, a prop, a Trojan horse. The house looked the same, manicured, sterile. The walkway was swept clean of all leaves. Lila opened the door before I had a chance to knock, as if she had been watching for me from the window. She was wearing an expensive-looking gray cashmere loungewear set. Her smile was bright, wide, and had absolutely nothing behind it. "Kaylee, what a surprise," she said. Her voice was smooth. All the sharp frequencies filtered out. "Hello, Lila. I was in the area. I brought a pie." She laughed, that high, cold sound, like tiny bells. "How thoughtful, trying to get back in our good graces before the holidays. Christmas is for forgiving, is it not?" "It's just a pie, Lila." She stepped back, a gesture of magnanimous welcome. "Well, come in, come in. Don't let the heat out." I stepped into the foyer. My father appeared from the living room, Harold Johnston, looking older and grayer than he had 10 months ago. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, then immediately dropped to the box in my hands. "An apple pie," he said, forcing a heartiness into his voice that sounded like static. "Wonderful, just wonderful. Kaylee, let's get a plate, and some forks." He scurried off toward the kitchen, a frantic burst of activity, an escape. Lila watched him go. A flicker of something, annoyance, or perhaps just ownership in her eyes. She turned back to me. "He's been so stressed. Poor thing," she said, guiding me into the formal living room. "The gala is taking so much out of him." I stopped just inside the doorway. It was the first time I'd been in this room since the garage incident. Something was wrong. The room felt lighter, colder, and unfamiliar. It took me a moment to place it. The heavy, dark wood bookshelf that had been my mother's, the one filled with her leather-bound classics and poetry, was gone. It was replaced by a thin, minimalist brass and glass shelving unit. On it were art gallery books with blank white covers and a few colorless glass sculptures. My mother's collection of antique clocks, the ones that chimed softly on the hour, was gone. The worn, intricate Persian rug where I had learned to crawl? Gone, replaced by something geometric and gray that felt thin underfoot. Lila was systematically erasing her. She wasn't just stealing the fund's money. She was gutting the house of my mother's memory, piece by piece, and replacing it with expensive, empty style. "The room has much better flow now, don't you think?" Lila asked, tracing the rim of a tall glass vase. "It was so dark and heavy before, so now it's light, it breathes." "It's very clean," I said. My father returned, carrying 3 small porcelain plates and 3 silver forks. We sat in the cold, clean, breathless room. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of forks clicking against plates. I didn't want to eat. The pie was a tool, and its primary job was done. Lila, however, was incapable of silence. She needed to perform. She thrived on an audience. "We are just drowning in preparations for the gala, aren't we, Harold?" "Oh, yes, so busy," he mumbled, staring at his plate. "It is going to be the event of the season," she said, turning her bright, empty gaze on me. "The Gala of Lights. We've already raised over $200,000 in corporate sponsorships before the event even starts." Her command center was spread across the antique dining room table, which was now visible from where I sat. A laptop, stacks of glossy binders, swatches of fabric in various shades of silver and blue. A large leather-bound event ledger was splayed open. Lila was arrogant. She was sloppy. She assumed I was stupid, beaten, a forgiven child coming home with a pie. I let my eyes drift to the open ledger. It was a vendor list. My heart rate remained steady, but I focused my vision, reading the names upside down. Event Solutions LLC, Rivermont Catering, Prestige Valet, and there, near the bottom, a large entry with a checkmark next to it. North Pine Production, Custom Staging and AV. The Phantom, the UPS store mailbox. She was using the same ghost company for her grandest, most expensive event yet. She was going to steal more, right in front of the entire town. "That's impressive," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Raising so much for the children's choir. They must be getting incredible new resources." Lila smiled, a tight, condescending expression. "They are. It all takes a professional touch, of course, which is why it's so lovely you're here today. Kaylee, just as a guest, we're so glad you've calmed down about the board. You can come to the gala, enjoy the music, listen to the dear children sing. Just let the adults handle the difficult parts. No need for any unpleasantness. We wouldn't want to embarrass anyone, would we?" The threat was clear. Behave. Don't make a scene like you did last time. Know your place. "I just want to support the fund," I said. "Good," she said, as if patting a dog. I stood up, picking up my half-eaten slice of pie. "I'll just take this to the kitchen. Do you need a knife to cut the rest?" "Just leave it on the counter," Lila said, already checking her phone, her attention shifting away from me now that I had been properly managed. "No trouble," I said, walking away. My father started to get up, his face etched with a familiar, anxious look. "Kaylee, I'm fine," I said, not looking at him. I pushed through the swinging door into the kitchen. It was the only room in the house that still looked the same warm oak cabinets, The same slightly worn countertops, the same faint smell of my mother's spice collection, and on the side of the stainless steel refrigerator, held up by a glittery joy magnet, was a single, laminated sheet of paper. Gala of Lights, Event Run of Show, Final. I was alone. I heard Lila's voice from the other room, her tone shifting as she took a call. Yes, the blue uplighting. I was very specific. Not teal. Blue. I need it to match the programs. I pulled out my phone. My hands were perfectly steady. I framed the schedule and took a clear, high-resolution photograph. 7:30 p.m. Doors open. String quartet. 8:15 p.m. Choir processional. Candlelight. 8:30 p.m. Welcome Address by Lila Renwick Johnston. 8:40 p.m. A Year in Review. Video presentation. And there it was. The crucial data point. The timestamp I needed. 8:42 p.m. VIP toast and donor recognition. 8:42. The exact moment the video was scheduled to end and the toast was scheduled to begin. The moment the spotlight would be on Lila. Glass raised. The moment the entire town's elite would be watching. Silent, attentive. It was the pivot point. The pivot point for her pivot bonus. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. The data was captured. The kitchen door swung open. It was my father. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes baggy and shot with red. "Kaylee," he said, his voice a low, pained whisper. He didn't step all the way into the kitchen. He hovered in the doorway, as if afraid to be trapped in here with me. "Dad." I wanted to talk about last Christmas, in the garage. You have to understand. Understand what? My voice was flat. No emotion. An engineer asking for a variable. She was under so much pressure. The holidays, the fund, all of it. She didn't mean it like that. She just wants everything to be perfect. I looked at him. He was making excuses for her. 10 months later, he was still making excuses. He was normalizing the assault. He was protecting the abuser. "She hit me, Dad." I know. But I just wanted to keep the peace. It was Christmas Eve. We can't have this kind of fighting in the family. "And you're not now?" I asked. "Was that about keeping the peace?" He flinched. He looked down. I didn't know what to do. "Harold, darling." Lila's voice cut through the air like a siren, sharp and demanding. "Harold, I need you. Which font do you prefer for the program, the script or the serif? I can't decide." He flinched again, but this time, relief washed over his face. He was saved. Saved from the hard conversation. Saved from having to apologize. Saved from having to be a father. "Coming, dear," he called back, his voice instantly bright again, that awful, static-filled cheer. He looked back at me, one last time, with that same weak, helpless shrug from the garage. We'll talk later. Kaylee." He turned and hurried out of the kitchen, back to his post. I knew then he would never help me. He would never choose me. He was as much a part of the corrupt system as she was. He was the faulty wiring that allowed the short circuit to happen. He was the silent, complicit ground hum that polluted the entire signal. I walked out of the kitchen, past the dining room table with its evidence, and through the new, cold living room. Lila was on the couch, phone to her ear, pointing at a font proof. She waved a dismissive goodbye, her focus already on the gala. My father was hovering by her side, nodding dutifully. I stepped out into the cold November air and closed the front door behind me. I didn't say goodbye. I got in my car. I sat for a minute in the silence. Then I started the engine and began the long drive back to the city. I turned on the radio. It was a classical station, and it was already playing Christmas music, a full choir. "Oh, Holy Night," the notes were pure, the harmony perfect, the soprano soaring into the upper registers. I listened to the soaring, angelic voices, and I looked at the picture on my phone. 8:42 p.m. Lila wanted a gala of lights. She wanted a year in review video. I am an audio engineer. I am a systems architect. I would give her exactly what she wanted. I would give her a show that Rivermont would never forget. I would make them all hear the real sound. The sound beneath the perfect, holy music, the sound of the wrought. The plan's execution began not with anger, but with logistics. The Rivermont Civic Hall was not the church. It was a municipal building, a concrete and glass box built in the 70s, and its AV system was a 20-year-old tangle of analog cables and failing amplifiers. It was a system I knew, because I had volunteered to fix it for free half a dozen times during high school. And I knew the man who ran it, Ace Calder. Ace was a lifer. He was a theater tech obsessive who wore all black, chain-smoked, and cared more about clean cable runs than he did about local politics. He was also, fundamentally, an honest man. He hated sloppy work, and he hated bullshit. Lila Renwick Johnston was the living embodiment of both. I found him in the catwalks above the stage, replacing a burnt-out par can. "Kaylee Johnston," he grunted down at me, not pausing his work. "Don't tell me you're here to sing." "I'm here to offer a pro bono upgrade," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the empty hall. "On behalf of Oralis Systems, I'm here for the gala." He stopped and looked down. The Gala of Lights, Lila's little vanity project. What upgrade? Security, redundancy. I hear she's got a big video presentation. It would be a technical disaster if the primary playback failed, or if, say, the feed was interrupted. I let that hang in the air. Oralis is letting me donate some new hardware, a failsafe system, a dedicated server that can take over the feed instantly if the main one goes down. It will run in parallel, completely independent. I can install it myself. Ace slowly climbed down the ladder. He stood in front of me, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. He studied my face. He knew me. He knew I didn't do pro bono work for Lila. "A failsafe," he said, his voice flat. "That runs in parallel." "And a new lighting controller," I added. "I saw you're still running on that ancient hog console. I can bring in a digital one, tie it into the new server. All the cues, video, audio, and lighting can be run from a single, unified timecode. Perfect sync. No risk of operator error." A tiny spark lit his eyes. "A unified timecode. At Oralis, we don't let a show fail," I said. "Lila wants professional. I'll give her professional." "She's not paying for it," he stated. "It's a charitable donation," I said. "For the fund, to ensure the children's performance is seen and heard perfectly. I'll just need full access to the control booth for 2 days to get the systems integrated." He grinned, a rare nicotine-stained expression. "Lila's year-in-review video. I've seen it. Her pet production company. North Pine. Sent it over. It's a joke. Overcompressed. Audio's peaking. It's garbage." "My system will play any file," I said. "Even garbage, flawlessly, and it will provide a high-definition backup of the entire event, for the archives." "All right, Johnston," he said. "Come in Monday. But you touch my patch bay. You label every cable. I don't want a rat's nest." "You won't even know I was here," I promised. For 2 days, I lived in the dark, dusty control booth. Ace left me alone. I installed my system. It was a broadcast-grade media server, small enough to fit in my luggage, powerful enough to run a stadium show. I connected it to the house projector, the main audio mixer, and the new lighting console I'd rented, on my own credit card. I set up 2 playlists. Playlist A was the public one. It contained the digital file for Lila's official year-in-review video, the one from North Pine Productions. This was the one I would show to Ace and any of Lila's volunteers. It was the decoy. Playlist B was on a hidden, encrypted partition. It was my version. I spent weeks building it. I'd taken Lila's cheesy, self-congratulatory video, all smiling children and slow-motion shots of her cutting ribbons, and I had systematically, surgically, inserted my evidence. It was an act of audio-visual engineering. The video would start normally, but as the narrator's voice began, Every dollar contributed becomes a note in the symphony of our community. A new graphic would fade in. A simple, clean flowchart. Rivermont Fund on one side, Renwick Advisory on the other, and a thick red line labeled consulting fees connecting them. As the video showed the groundbreaking for a new music garden, I would superimpose the scanned, duplicate invoices. The text was identical. The dates were different. The invoice numbers were sequential. And the audio, that was my specialty. I took the choir's soaring rendition of Carol of the Bells and used it as a bed. Then, I mixed in Lila's voice, that cold, satisfied clip. Don't worry, there's always a bonus for those who know how to pivot. I processed it, not as a voiceover, but as a part of the music itself, a phantom harmony, timed to hit precisely as the Winterline Partners logo flashed on screen. The climax of the video was a simple, white screen. On it, in black, serif text, was the sworn, notarized testimony from two local vendors. I had met them in a coffee shop far out of town. They were terrified. Lila had forced them to inflate their invoices by 30% and give her the difference in cash as a holiday surcharge to stay on the fund's preferred list. They thought they were the only ones. I showed them they weren't. Their rage, once lit, was hotter than mine. Their signed affidavits were my shield. I had my lawyer friend, Ben, review the entire video. Is it legal? I'd asked. You're not alleging. Kaylee, you're presenting facts, he said. Public filings, legally recorded audio from a public event, and sworn affidavits. It's not libel. It's evidence. Just make sure your sources are cited. I added a final card, citing the document numbers from the state's corporate registry and the informational police report number from last Christmas. The final step was the trigger. I programmed a single command into the server's core, an automated, hidden time code. It would sync to the building's atomic clock. At exactly 8:42 p.m., the server would override all other inputs. It would lock out the manual controls. It would hijack the projector feed. It would seize the audio bus. And it would execute playlist B. No one could stop it. I couldn't stop it. The machine was set. When I showed Ace the test of the failsafe system, I just showed him playlist A. See? I said, as Lila's terrible video played. It kicks in. Seamless. Impressive, he said. But what about my lights? I've pre-programmed a cue, I said. At the end of the video, for the big toast, it will give you a nice, warm amber wash. It's all on the time code. 8:42. Good, he said. I'll be at the bar. But I had added another cue, a secret one. I found the main donor plaque in the lobby, a huge backlit bronze and wood monstrosity that listed every major donor from the last 50 years. I spent 4 hours in the maintenance crawl space behind it. I installed a single, high-output LED strip. It was wired to a wireless receiver, which was slaved to my time code. At 8:42, as the affidavits appeared on screen, that LED strip would activate. It would not light the front. It would light the wall behind the plaque, backlighting the donor names. Ace and I had, with a router and some matching wood stain, added a new name to the very bottom row of the plaque, Winterline Partners. My fail-safes were in place. Mara Albright was ready. Her article was written, a detailed, fact-checked exposé complete with all my documents. It was sitting in the Ledger's content management system, scheduled to go live at 8:43 p.m. It would be sent to the wire services 2 minutes later. My final fail-safe was my dead man's switch, an email. I wrote it in my hotel room. I wasn't staying at my father's house. The subject line was, "For the choir and the truth." The recipients were the State Attorney General, the IRS, and the Rivermont Town Council. To whom it may concern, I wrote, attached you will find a comprehensive file detailing felony-level financial malfeasance regarding the Rivermont Youth and Arts Fund, conducted by its director, Lila Renwick Johnston. I attached everything, the police report, the affidavits, the financial charts, the full, unedited video, the audio file. I scheduled it to send on December 25th at 9 a.m. If I was successful, I would wake up, log in, and cancel it. If I wasn't, the truth would be delivered anyway. On the afternoon of December 24th, I stood in my quiet hotel room. The gala started in 3 hours. My work was done. The system was built. The signal was routed. The trap was set. All I had to do was show up and let the time code run. I steamed my outfit, not a glittering gala gown, not something that would blend in. I had chosen a pantsuit, dark, navy blue wool, sharp shoulders, clean lines, underneath, a simple white silk shell. It was the suit of an engineer, of a professional. It was quiet, it was determined, it was armor. I looked in the mirror. My face was calm, my hands were steady. I felt the low, cold hum of the server in the control booth. Waiting. I felt the click of the timer, counting down the seconds. 8:42. Rejoice. I arrived at the Rivermont Civic Hall at 7:40 p.m. The Gala of Lights was already in full, deafening swing. The lobby was a sea of forced merriment, a cacophony of competing signals. The air was too hot, thick with the smell of damp wool coats, mulled wine, and a dozen different expensive perfumes clashing in the overheated space. The lighting was all wrong. Ace and I had agreed on a soft, neutral white for the lobby, but someone, Lila, undoubtedly, had added unfiltered amber gels, casting a sickly, jaundiced glow over everything. It was meant to look warm, like candlelight. It just looked cheap. It made the sparkling crystal glasses, which I knew were just high-grade acrylic, look like plastic. I moved through the crowd in my dark blue suit. I was an anomaly. The other women were in sequins, in velvet, in festive reds and greens. Their hair high and stiff. They were performing. I was operational. I heard her before I saw her. Lila's laugh. That high-frequency trill, cut through the din like a feedback squeal. She was standing near the grand staircase, a glass of champagne held in her perfectly manicured hand. She was wearing a dress of metallic silver, so bright it was almost white, catching the amber light and reflecting it like a weapon. She was a queen, holding court. And the projections for next year, she was saying to the mayor, her voice ringing with false modesty. Well, let's just say the fund has never been healthier. A record year. A record year. My father, Harold, stood just behind her left shoulder, a shadow in a tuxedo that seemed one size too large for him, as if he had physically shrunk in the last 10 months. He was holding her empty canapé plate and her cashmere wrap. His eyes were not on the mayor or on his wife. They were scanning the crowd, flitting from face to face, his brow tight with a painful, simmering anxiety. He looked like a man waiting for a bomb to go off. He saw me. His eyes locked on mine for a single, terrible second. The anxiety flared into pure, unadulterated panic. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He just looked away, faster than a flinch, turning his attention to a spot on the carpet, pretending to listen intently to Lila's boast. He was a coward, down to the molecular level. Lila followed his gaze, her smile tightening when she saw me. She excused herself from the mayor and glided toward me. The crowd parted for her. "Kaylee," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine pity. "You came. How brave of you, to show your face and support the cause. After all that unpleasantness, it shows real maturity." She was performing for the small circle of onlookers. She was painting me as the prodigal daughter, the problem child, now tamed and returned to the fold. "I'm here for the choir." "Lila," I said, my voice quiet, flat. I refused to match her volume. "Of course you are, dear," she said, patting my arm, a gesture of absolute dominance. "It's all for the children. Do try the shrimp puffs. They are simply divine." She turned and glided back to her circle. The performance complete. I had been seen, managed, and dismissed. The heavy doors to the auditorium opened, and a new sound spilled out, temporarily drowning the brittle laughter. It was the sound of the children's choir. Warming up, they were practicing scales, their voices high and untrained. a beautiful, chaotic jumble of pure signal. I heard a cascade of young laughter. They were not performing. They were just children, happy to be singing. They were the only honest sound in the entire building. This was the sound she was stealing. This was the signal I was protecting. My resolve, which had been a cold, logical certainty, solidified into something hard and heavy as iron. I needed to check the system. I bypassed the bar, skirted the edge of the crowd, and made my way to the service door that led to the catwalks and the control booth. I slipped through it. The sound of the gala instantly muted, replaced by the dull hum of the building's ventilation. The air was cool here, and it smelled of dust, old paint, and electricity. I climbed the narrow, metal-runged ladder to the booth. It was a small, dark box perched at the back of the hall, overlooking the sea of empty seats. Ace was there, just as I knew he would be. He was leaning back in his operator's chair, feet up on the old console, silhouetted against the dim glow of the house lights. "Showtime. Johnston," he grunted. He didn't look at me. He was watching the crowd file in. "Just running a final diagnostic," I said. I moved to the rack I had installed. My server was humming quietly, its status lights a steady, healthy green. I logged into the terminal. I checked the connection to the main projector. Strong. I checked the audio bus. Patched and live. I checked the internal clock. It was synced to the atomic clock. 8:31 p.m. "You're sure about this?" Ace said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. He still hadn't looked at me. "I'm sure about the data," I said. "She's a piece of work," he muttered. "Her production company tried to stiff me on the power bill for the uplighting, sent me an invoice with a different name on it than the one on the contract. Sloppy. She's gotten used to no one checking the signal chain," I said. I looked down at the stage. It was set for the choir. 3 perfect rows of risers. The large projection screen hanging above them was black, waiting. I could see the lobby, the way the light from the bronze donor plaque spilled out. My hidden LED strip was dormant, invisible. "Everything is nominal," I said. "The timecode is armed. Playlist A is loaded as the primary. Playlist B is standing by for automatic execution." Ace finally turned his head. His eyes were sharp in the dim light. "You're not going to hit go. The machine is going to do it for you." "The machine is impartial," I said. "It just executes the code." He nodded, a slow gesture of respect, not for me, but for the system, for the cold, clean logic of it. "Good," he said. "I like a show with no operator error." I nodded back to him. The pact was sealed. I left the booth and found a standing room spot at the very back of the main hall, directly in the center aisle. I had a clear view of the stage, the screen, and the main exits. The lights went down. A hush fell over the room, a collective, expectant intake of breath. The string quartet in the lobby faded into silence. A single brilliant white spotlight hit the lectern at the side of the stage, and Lila walked into it. She was radiant. The silver dress, under the clean white light, looked magnificent. She smiled, soaking in the applause. She held up her hands, a gesture of humble grace. "Thank you," she said, her voice filling the hall, perfectly amplified, my system. "Thank you all. Welcome, friends, partners, and believers in the future of Rivermont." She began her speech. It was a masterpiece of empty sentiment. She talked about community, harmony, and our shared vision. She praised the children. She praised the donors. She praised the hard-working volunteers. "This has been a banner year for the fund," she said, her voice swelling with emotion. "A year of unprecedented growth, and with that growth comes a duty, a sacred duty, of transparency." I heard a few people in the crowd murmur, "Hear, hear." "We believe that every single dollar, every single act of generosity should be honored and accounted for," she continued. "That is why this year we have prepared a special presentation, a year-in-review documentary, to show you exactly where your faith in us has gone and the incredible work it has allowed us to do." She was setting the stage perfectly. She was handing me the knife. I looked at my watch. The dim face read 8:40 p.m., 2 minutes. I felt, rather than saw, a movement to my right. I turned my head. My father was standing in the shadows of the side aisle, not 10 feet away. He must have slipped in after Lila took the stage. He wasn't looking at his wife. He wasn't looking at the stage. He was staring directly at me. His face was a mask of sheer desperate terror. He knew. He didn't know what I was doing. But he knew my stillness. He knew the look in my eyes. He saw the engineer who had photographed her own bruised face. He saw the daughter who had filed the police report. He was pleading. His eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open. He gave his head a tiny, frantic shake. "Don't, please, Kaylee, don't ruin this. Don't ruin us. Not now." It was the garage, all over again. The same man. The same desperate plea for peace over truth. The same complete and total moral failure. I held his gaze. I felt the last flicker of sentiment. The tiny, residual echo of the daughter I used to be. Extinguish. The light just went out. I gave him no reaction. I did not nod. I did not shake my head. I just looked at him, a blank cipher, and then I slowly, deliberately, turned my head back to the stage. I heard him make a small sound, a choked gasp. "And now," Lila beamed, "please direct your attention to the screen for a look at our shared journey." She turned and, with a grand sweeping gesture, pointed to the massive screen above the choir risers. The audience applauded politely. I looked at the window on the far wall. The snow was falling harder now. Thick, beautiful. Silent flakes drifting down in the darkness. A perfect Christmas Eve. My phone vibrated in my hand. I looked down. A text from Ace. Just one character. The theater masks. Success. The audience noise died. The hall was completely silent. The screen was black. My watch showed 8:41 and 55 seconds. I took one steadying breath. I texted back a single emoji. The fader. Begin. The screen stayed black for 1 full second. A single soft piano note. The beginning of "O Come, All Ye Faithful." The video faded in. It was exactly the file Lila had commissioned. Oversaturated, garish colors, a shot of the children's choir, waving stiffly at the camera, their faces washed out by the terrible lighting Lila's team had used. The audio quality was thin, compressed. The audience visibly relaxed. This was the show. This was the expected, heartwarming, slightly amateur production. In the reflected glow of the screen, I saw Lila smile, a genuine, relieved smile. She thought she had won. She thought my presence was a surrender. A deep, overly sincere male voice, the kind used for pharmaceutical commercials, filled the auditorium. "What is a community?" the voice asked, as the video cut to a slow-motion shot of volunteers stacking canned goods. "It is a symphony of neighbors. It is a chorus of shared values." I watched Lila. She was nodding along, her silver dress shimmering. She was the conductor of this symphony. "Here at the Rivermont Youth and Arts Fund," the narrator continued, "we believe that every single dollar contributed becomes a note in that beautiful song of hope." On screen, a graphic appeared, showing cartoon coins flying into a box labeled "The Fund." This was her transparency. I checked my watch. 8:41 and 58 seconds. 59. The clock on the wall, the large municipal clock at the back of the hall, clicked. 8:42. The piano music did not fade. It was severed. A digital click echoed through the hall as my server's master relay took control. The screen went black. The silence was absolute. A woman in the third row coughed nervously. I saw Lila's head snap toward the control booth, her smile vanishing, replaced by a flash of fury. She thought Ace had made a mistake. She thought her show was ruined. A new image faded in. It was not a video. It was a graphic, rendered in crisp, high-definition white lines on a black background. My graphic. The same male narrator's voice returned, but my audio processing had stripped the warmth from it. It was cold, clinical, and precise. "A system of integrity," the voice stated, "a clear path from donor to child." On screen, a flowchart appeared. Rivermont donors, Youth and Arts Fund, choir programs and scholarships. The lines were green, solid. The audience murmured in approval. This looked professional. This looked real. Then, a new box faded in. Off to the side. Winterline Partners, LLC. A new line, a dotted red one, branched away from Youth and Arts Fund and pointed directly to Winterline. The box for Winterline began to blink. A soft, synthesized beep, perfectly synchronized, echoed with each flash. Beep, beep, beep. The mood in the room changed. It went from warmth to confusion. What was Winterline? The screen cut to black. Then, a new clip played. It was grainy. Shot from the fixed surveillance camera I had installed in the community center meeting room. The date and timestamp were visible in the corner. The clip showed Lila at the head of a table, laughing. The audio was my isolated file from last Christmas. The sound from the lectern mic, filtered, amplified, undeniable. A woman's voice, muffled, said something indistinct, and then Lila's. Clear as a bell, her low, throaty, private laugh. "Don't worry," she said. "The children get their new sheet music, but there's always a bonus for those who know how to pivot." The audience's reaction was a wave of uncomfortable, hesitant laughter, a blooper, a lighthearted joke. But in the front row, the mayor, who was sitting next to the school superintendent, did not laugh. They exchanged a single, sharp look. Lila was no longer looking at the audience. She was staring at the screen, her face a mask of pale, frozen disbelief. The screen cut again, a hard, rhythmic slam. The music started. Not, "Oh come, all ye faithful." It was Carol of the Bells, the low driving, four-note ostinato, dung 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 dung. On screen, a document appeared, an invoice. North Pine Production, dung 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 dung. A second invoice, identical. North Pine Production, dung 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 dung. A third. The music swelled, the bells joining the harmony, frantic, accelerating. The screen became a strobe, an invoice for event consulting, for $15,000, flashed, perfectly in time with the first bell chime. An invoice for acoustic management, for $10,000, hit on the second, a third, a fourth, all identical, all paid. Flash, flash, flash. The documents were the percussion. The bells were the engine. The music was no longer holy. It was the sound of a spreadsheet, the sound of a paper shredder, the sound of theft. The entire auditorium was silent, trapped in the accelerating, frantic rhythm of the music and the flashing invoices. Then, a click, a new sound, a harsh, physical sound, the sound of a high-power relay. Behind the grand bronze donor plaque in the lobby, which was visible from the back of the hall, my LED strip fired, a blast of cold. 6,000 K white light flooded the wall. The names of the town's founding families were suddenly thrown into sharp, hard relief, their polished bronze letters casting long shadows. And at the very bottom, in the new row, Ace and I had routed into the wood. The name, backlit like a Broadway marquee, blazed with light. Winterline Partners. A gasp went up, a single, collective intake of breath from 300 people at once. Someone in the back row stood up to see it better. People were turning, looking from the lobby plaque back to the stage. The music stopped. The flashing stopped. The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than any I had ever engineered. And into that silence, a new voice spoke. My voice. I had recorded it at Oralis, through a $50,000 microphone. It was clean, no emotion, no anger, just fact. For the past 2 years, my voice said, 30% of all public donations to the Rivermont Youth and Arts Fund never reached the choir. The screen changed. It now showed the final, complete flowchart. Donations. Fund. Winterline Partners. Renwick Advisory. The last box. Renwick Advisory was highlighted in red. Lila's maiden name. A closed loop. This is not transparency, my voice concluded. as the legal signature card for Renwick Advisory faded in. "This is embezzlement." I looked at Lila. She was rigid. The silver dress was a suit of armor, and the woman inside had died. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the screen. She was not blinking. I looked at the MC, the high school principal. He was holding his printed cue cards. His hand was shaking so badly that the cards were rattling, a soft, papery sound that was audible in the silence. I looked at my father. He was standing in the aisle, frozen, still holding his highball glass. He was staring at the name, Renwick Advisory, on the giant screen. The glass slipped. It fell from his numb fingers. It hit the thick, industrial-grade carpet of the Civic Hall. It did not shatter. It landed with a soft, wet, sickening thud. The sound was tiny, but in the crushing, absolute stillness of the hall, it was an explosion. My father did not move. He did not bend to retrieve it. He just stared at the dark stain of whiskey spreading at his feet. I looked at my watch. The second hand swept up. Perpendicular. Perfect. 8:43. The video file was complete. Mara Albright's article was now live. The machine had done its job. The moment broke. The thud of the dropped glass was a starting pistol. Lila, galvanized by a primal, cornered animal fury, moved. She sprang from her front row seat, her silver dress a streak of metallic light, and ran not for the exit, but at the stage. "Turn it off!" she shrieked. Her voice, for the first time in my life, was raw and ugly, stripped of all its polished, processed charm. It was the sound of pure, unfiltered noise. "Ace, turn that filth off now!" She scrambled up the low stairs to the side of the stage. Grabbing the MC's arm, the principal looked at her, his face ashen, his cue cards fluttering to the floor. "Where is the control?" she hissed. "Give me the microphone." He fumbled with the wireless microphone in his shaking hand, and Lila ripped it from his grasp. "Ace!" she screamed into it. The sound blasted through the hall. A painful, high-frequency spike of feedback that made the front rows cringe. My system, anticipating the spike, instantly compressed it, but the shriek had already done its damage. "You are fired! Shut it down! Shut it down now!" From my place at the back of the hall, I could just make out Ace's silhouette in the control booth. He was a shadow against the dim blue light of the consoles. He leaned back in his chair, feet up. He did not move. The screen did not go black. My server was locked. The time code was absolute. The machine did not care if Ace was fired. It had its instructions. The video feed changed. The flowchart of her theft faded, replaced by a new, sterile white background. A new voiceover began. Not mine. This one was older, male, with a dry, precise cadence. It was the voice of authority, the voice of numbers. I had paid this independent forensic accountant from a firm in the state capital $2,000 for this 3-minute audio analysis. At the request of a private party, the accountant's voice said, my firm analyzed the public filings of the Rivermont Youth and Arts Fund against the state-registered incorporation documents of its listed vendors. As he spoke, the documents appeared on screen, not graphics, but high-resolution scans of the actual filings, notarized, stamped, and undeniable. We note an expenditure of $100,000, paid over 4 quarters, to a consulting group, Winterline Partners. The camera on screen zoomed in on the Winterline filing, highlighting the address, the UPS store. Winterline Partners, the voice continued, is a legal pass-through entity, wholly owned by a holding company registered as Renwick Advisory. The Renwick filing appeared. The sole registered agent and beneficiary of Renwick Advisory, the voice said, is Lila Renwick, also known as Lila Renwick Johnston. The camera zoomed in on her name, her legal name. A new musical score faded in beneath the accountant's voice. It was not Carol of the Bells. It was the choir recording from last year. But I had digitally pitched it down, slowing it, shifting the entire piece into a haunting, desolate minor key. The children's voices, once angelic, now sounded like a dirge, a chorus of witnesses. "Lies!" Lila screamed into the microphone, her voice cracking, the high society polish dissolving into something sharp and desperate. "Spliced. It's all fabricated. This is a technical malfunction." She was pacing the stage, a silver wolf in a cage, looking frantically from the unmoving screen to the impassive face of the mayor in the front row. "This is slander. It's libel. It's a hoax." The audience was frozen. They were trapped between the undeniable, cold evidence on the screen, the legal documents, the signatures, and the frantic, hysterical performance of the woman they had trusted for years. The accountant's voice continued, cold and impartial, ignoring her. "We also note payments totaling $62,000 to a vendor, North Pine Productions. This entity has no business license, no tax ID, and its listed address is a private mail drop. The checks were cashed by—" "Stop it!" Lila shrieked. That was my cue. I began to walk. I moved from my position at the back of the hall, down the long, carpeted center aisle. My footsteps were silent, but the movement, in that frozen, silent hall, was seismic. Every head in the room turned. They turned away from Lila. They turned away from the screen. They turned to me. They saw me, in my dark blue suit, walking steadily, calmly, toward the stage. Lila saw me. Her eyes widened, the recognition finally dawning, cutting through her panic. This wasn't Ace. This wasn't a random malfunction. This was me. "You," she breathed into the mic, the single word echoing through the hall, a sound of pure venom. "You, bitter little nothing, you did this." She pointed at me, her hand shaking. "Security! Get her out of here! She is trespassing! She is ruining this! Someone stop her!" Two ushers, high school students in ill-fitting red vests, looked at me, then at Lila, and did not move. I reached the front of the auditorium. I did not go for the stage. I stopped at the small, secondary lectern set up on the floor, the one for the student speakers and announcements. It had its own microphone. I stepped up to it and pressed the on switch. A soft, clean click. The green light came on. "Hello? Everyone?" I said. My voice, processed by my own system, was calm, clear, and perfectly amplified. It had no feedback. It had no hysteria. It was the voice of the engineer. The entire auditorium held its breath. "My name is Kaylee Johnston," I said, my voice filling the space, overriding her distorted shrieks. "Lila is right about one thing. I am the one who did this." On stage. Lila looked as if I had struck her, as if I had slapped her in front of the whole town. "Last Christmas," I continued, my voice level, "I was in charge of the audio for the choir. I installed the mixing board, the board that automatically, and legally, recorded everything that was said near a live microphone at that public event. The clip you heard tonight, there's always a bonus. That was from the archive." I let that sink in. I was the technician. I was the witness. The screen behind Lila changed again. The music and the accountant's voice faded out. A single, enormous, black and white QR code appeared, dominating the space. "Lila calls this a hoax," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "She calls it fabricated. I am an engineer. I do not deal in fabrications. I deal in data. The truth is not a hoax." I pointed to the screen. In her hand, she is holding a microphone. In your hands, you are holding phones. Please take them out. Scan this code. A hesitant rustle, a moment of social paralysis. Then, one person in the second row, a man I recognized as the head of the town bank, pulled out his phone. He aimed it at the screen, then another, and another, like a wave, like a reverse candlelight vigil. 100, then 200, then 300 phone screens lit up the darkness. "The link," I said, "will take you to the Elm Street Ledger. The article, which went live at exactly 8:43 p.m., contains everything you have just seen, the full financial analysis, the duplicate invoices, The corporate filings from the Secretary of State, the sworn affidavits from the vendors she extorted. It is all there. It is all public. It is all real. A collective gasp as the first people opened the link. I saw the blue and white header of Mara's website reflected in their glasses. I saw a woman cover her mouth. The headline was simple, brutal, and clear. Rivermont Arts Fund director accused of embezzlement. Bank records show payments to personal shell company. Lila was shaking. She was trying to form a smile, to perform her way out of this, but her facial muscles would not obey. Her upper lip was trembling, a violent, uncontrollable tremor. She looked at the sea of phones. All pointed at the evidence, not at her. She was no longer the queen. She was no longer the center of attention. She was just a woman in a silver dress, trapped in a spotlight, rendered obsolete by the data. "This is," she tried, her voice a desperate, thin rasp. "This is an attack, a personal attack, by a vindictive, unstable." I cut her off, my voice remaining calm. "It is not an attack, Lila. It is a system diagnostic. The system was corrupt. I am just the engineer pointing it out." The screen changed one last time. It wiped the QR code away. It was a single document, a contract. It was the Winterline Partners Consulting Agreement, signed between the Rivermont Youth and Arts Fund and her shell company. My voiceover came back, one last time, cold and final, over the image. "This is the contract, effective November 12th of this year, authorizing the first payment of $25,000. It was signed by Lila Renwick Johnston as director of the fund and countersigned by her as president of Winterline Partners." The camera zoomed in. There was her signature, that proud, arrogant, looping L, twice, side by side, the lie and the truth, in her own handwriting, projected 10 feet high for the entire town to see. The show was over. The screen held the image of her signatures, side by side, a monument to her arrogance. The hall was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the projector fan, a high-frequency whine that set my teeth on edge. Lila was on the stage, a statue in silver. The two student ushers, sensing the shift in power, had moved quietly to the foot of the stage stairs. They weren't restraining her. They were just there, a human barrier, preventing her from making another rush at the non-existent controls. Ace had locked the system. The control booth was a fortress, and I was on the floor. I kept my hand on the microphone at the small lectern. My voice, when I spoke again, was just as calm, just as flat. "For the record," I said, and the sound of my own voice was a clean, sharp signal in the corrupted room. "And for the members of the town council and the bank who are present tonight, a full copy of this dossier, the affidavits, the bank records, the audio, and the state filings, was delivered to the State Attorney General's office at 9 a.m. this morning." That was the final cut. The dead man's switch hadn't been a threat for tomorrow. It was a fact from this morning. The knowledge that this was not just a public humiliation, but the beginning of a legal firestorm, broke the paralysis. A man in the second row stood up. It was Mr. Abernathy, the president of Rivermont's oldest bank. He was a pillar of the community, a man who had served on the fund's board with my mother. "Lila," he said, his voice not loud, but carrying the weight of his office. "Is that your signature, Lila?" Lila's head snapped toward him. She opened her mouth. A small, dry, rasping sound came out. She was mute. "The $100,000, Lila," another voice called out, this time from a woman I recognized as the hospital administrator. "The Winterline fee. Where is that money now?" Is it gone?" someone else whispered, and the whisper was a contagion. The room erupted, not in shouts, but in 100, terrified, angry conversations. All of it? My God, my donation. She signed it herself. Lila just shook her head, her hand at her throat. "No," she whispered, uselessly. "No, lies." I looked away from her. I looked into the side aisle. My father was still there. He had not moved. He was staring at the dark, wet stain on the carpet, where his glass had fallen. He was a man watching his own life bleed out onto the floor. I stepped away from the lectern. I turned off the microphone. This next part was not for the gala. This was not for the donors. This was for him. I walked the 10 feet that separated us. The murmuring of the crowd faded, my focus narrowing until the only things in the world were me and him, standing in the dim aisle. He heard me approach. He flinched, but did not look up. "Dad," I said. My voice was quiet, for his ears only. He squeezed his eyes shut. "Last year," I said. "Christmas Eve, in the garage." He flinched, a full-body tremor this time. When she hit me, when she put her hand on my face, right there in the cold. "You stood in the doorway. You saw her hand. You saw my face. You saw the truth. And you said—" He looked up then, his eyes swimming in a terror I had never seen before. A desperate, silent plea for me to stop. I did not stop. "You said, 'Not now.'" I held his gaze. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger. Just the cold, clean finality of a closed circuit. "I'm just asking, Dad, for the informational report. When? When is the time? Is it now? Is this the time?" He choked. A sound, a half sob, half gasp, tore from his throat. "Kaylee," he whispered, his voice ravaged. I just wanted to keep the peace. It was Christmas. I just wanted peace. For the family." "You didn't keep the peace," I said, my voice as level as a surveyor's line. "You just kept it quiet. You kept her peace. You kept the peace by being silent in the face of injustice. You kept the peace by letting the lie stand. That's not peace, Dad. That's just surrender." From the stage, a new sound, a harsh, grating laugh. Lila had seen me talking to him. She had seen her primary shield, her husband, her accomplice, crumbling, and it gave her back her voice. "Jealous," she spat. The microphone was off, but her shriek carried. "You've always been a jealous, pathetic little girl. You couldn't stand that he chose me. You couldn't stand that I fixed what your mother left behind. This is just a tantrum. You're jealous." I turned, very slowly. I did not walk back to the lectern. I just looked at her, standing on the stage under the white light, a silver-clad fury, and I looked at the giant screen behind her, at the 2 signatures. I raised my voice just enough to be heard over the confused crowd. "The truth isn't jealous, Lila." I pointed to the screen. "Numbers don't get jealous. A signature on a legal contract isn't an emotion, it's just a fact. And you signed it, twice." The simplicity of it, the blunt finality, broke the dam. The mayor was on his feet, on his phone, his face pale and furious. Mr. Abernathy was walking toward the stage, pointing. "Lila, you will answer me. The bank's donations." The room was descending into chaos, the ugly sound of a town eating one of its own. And from the side of the stage, a new figure appeared, Mrs. Davies, the choir conductor. She was a small, mousy woman, but her face was set in a look of profound, protective horror. Her eyes were not on Lila, or me, or the crowd. They were on the 40 children sitting on the risers behind her, who were watching this entire thing, their faces pale and confused. She hurried over to me, ignoring everyone else. She saw me as the one with the answers. "Miss Johnston, Kaylee," she said, her voice trembling. "The children, they're frightened. Should I stop? Should I take them home?" I looked past her, at the choir, at the faces of the children she had been stealing from. This was the only part I hadn't wanted. This was the collateral damage. They were the signal, and this was the noise I had created to save them. I felt a single, sharp pang of something, not regret, just cost. I shook my head. "No, Mrs. Davies," I said, my voice firm. "They've practiced for 3 months. They are the only honest thing in this entire hall. They deserve to perform." I looked her in the eye. Let them sing. Let the music bear witness." She stared at me for a long second. The fear in her eyes was replaced by something else, a flicker of iron, a hard, cold respect. She nodded. Once, she turned, walked back to her podium, and raised her thin arms. The choir, on pure, drilled muscle memory, stood. The angry murmur of the crowd was a low, snarling hum. Mrs. Davies gave the downbeat. And the choir began to sing. "O Holy Night," the first note, from the lead soprano, was pure, high, and clear as glass. It cut through the angry noise. The children sang. They sang with all the innocence and power that Lila had tried to monetize. The sound of their voices, beautiful and pure, rising over the ugly, confused arguments of the adults, was the most devastating sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of the truth. It was the sound of what had been betrayed. The crowd quieted, stunned into silence by the surreal, heartbreaking counterpoint, the song of hope, rising from the ashes of the lie. I walked back to the lectern. I pressed the on switch. "The Rivermont Youth and Arts Fund is, as of tonight, compromised," I said, my voice layering over the music. "But the children's music is not." The choir sang on. "A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices." This morning, my legal team established a new, independent trust account with an accredited, bonded financial firm. It will be managed by a third-party, independent auditor. The details and the link are on the Ledger website. From this moment, any and all donations to that account will be transparent, and 100% of the funds will go directly to these children. I looked at my father. He was still in the aisle, but he was looking at me now. His face was no longer broken. It was empty. His eyes were overflowing with tears, but he made no sound. He just watched me, the daughter he had failed, as the choir his mother had loved sang about the fall of sin. The song reached its crescendo. I did not wait for it to end. "The gala is not over," I said, "but the pretense is dead. Thank you for listening." I turned off the microphone. I turned, and without looking back at my father or at Lila, I walked up the center aisle, through the stunned, silent crowd, and out the main doors, into the cold, silent, falling snow. I did not wake up on Christmas morning. I had not slept. I sat in my silent apartment, 200 miles away from Rivermont, and watched the 9 a.m. deadline on my email server click over. The dead man's switch, the full, unredacted file sent to the Attorney General, was no longer a failsafe. It was a confirmation. The system was now resetting. The consequences were not loud. At first, they were administrative. They were cold. By 9:01 a.m., my phone was vibrating. It was Mara Albright. "They've frozen the fund," she said. Her voice was electric. "The AG's office just issued a statement, actively investigating based on credible reports. The Ledger website has crashed twice from the traffic. It's gone national. Kaylee, the wire services picked it up." The Rivermont Youth and Arts Fund Board, the one that had so passively watched Lila operate, convened an emergency meeting on Christmas Day. I imagined them on a Zoom call, in their festive sweaters, their faces pale and horrified. By noon, Lila Renwick Johnston had been unanimously voted out as director, a legal formality as she had already been locked out of the accounts. Mr. Abernathy, the bank president, was appointed temporary director. His first act was to hire the independent forensic accounting firm I had used, this time to conduct a full, exhaustive audit. The investigation, Mara told me, expanded. It was no longer just about Lila's theft. It was about the board's negligence. It was about who knew, who should have known, and who, like my father, had chosen silence. Reporters from the state capitol descended on Rivermont. They flocked to the civic hall, filming the high school ushers who were still cleaning up the champagne flutes and spilled canapes. They went to the church. They went to my father's house. But Harold Johnston was gone. When the first news van arrived at the immaculate, overly decorated mansion, No one answered the door. Lila was inside, of course, with a newly hired crisis PR lawyer. But my father's car was gone. He had, in the chaos following my speech, simply walked out of the hall, gotten into his car, and driven away. He had vanished, leaving Lila to face the consequences he had helped to build. Mara's article was a wildfire. It was the perfect, tragic, holiday-timed story. Daughter exposes stepmother's $1 million charity fraud during Christmas gala. It was brutal. It was factual. It was everywhere. It sparked a dozen other, smaller investigations into similar community funds in other towns. My year-in-review video, which Mara had embedded, became a case study in nonprofit transparency, or the lack of it. The fallout in Rivermont was seismic, but quiet. Ace Calder became, to his visible disgust, a local hero. The town council issued a formal commendation to him for protecting the integrity of the event's technical data. When a local reporter asked him about it, Ace just shrugged, lit a cigarette, and said, "The system was garbage. Kaylee Johnston just took out the trash. Now get off the stage. You're scuffing the floor." The vendors, the ones who had given me the signed affidavits, were protected. Their names were redacted in the public files. One of them, the owner of the local print shop, sent a card to my apartment in the city. Inside was no note, just a cash register receipt and 5 $100 bills, a refund for his extortion. I endorsed the bills and mailed them directly to Mr. Abernathy as the first donation to the new, audited trust account. The church, predictably, moved to protect itself. The pastor, who had sat silently in the front row, delivered a sermon the following Sunday to a packed house. He didn't mention Lila by name. He spoke instead of the insidious nature of worldly pride, and praised the courage of those who choose the hard path of truth over the easy path of community honor. It was a magnificent act of spiritual gymnastics, repositioning the church as a victim, and me as its agent of purification. Lila tried to fight back. Of course she did. Her PR firm issued a statement decrying the highly coordinated and vindictive personal attack. She took to social media, posting a long, rambling video. She was in a dimly lit room, her hair down, wearing a simple white blouse. She looked exhausted and wronged. She called me disturbed and unstable. She claimed the documents were clever forgeries and taken completely out of context. The internet, which I had armed, did my work for me. The replies were not emotional. They were just data. Within seconds, the first user replied with a direct link to the Ledger article. The second replied with a high-resolution screenshot of the Winterline Partners LLC filing. The third, simply, "But you signed it, twice." Her post was buried under a tidal wave of her own documentation. She deleted her account by the end of the day. Weeks passed. January turned to February. The snow in Rivermont melted, revealing the gray, muddy truth of the ground. I worked. I calibrated systems. I filtered noise. I did not go back. Then, a package arrived. It was a square brown box, postmarked from a small town near Cross Lake, 50 miles north. The return address was just a post office box. I opened it. Inside, wrapped in yellowed newspaper, was my mother's crystal music box. It was heavy, rectangular, with intricate, cut-glass stars. I had not seen it since before she died. Lila had buried it in the garage, in one of those bins. I turned the key. The sound was stiff, the mechanism cold, but it played. A tinny, but perfect, rendition of a Brahms lullaby. A note, on a small, folded piece of cheap, lined paper, fell out. "Kaylee, this is yours. It should never have been in that house. I should have done this a long time ago. H." He called me 1 week later. His voice was unrecognizable. The hearty, forced static was gone. The anxious, weak whine was gone. It was just a voice, thin, tired. "I'm at the cabin by the lake," he said. "The old rental place." "I know," I said. I would like to see you. Kaylee, if you would be willing, I will buy you coffee. At the diner on the highway. That's all." I drove out on a Saturday. The diner was cold, the windows fogged. He was sitting in a booth, wearing a flannel shirt. He looked 10 years older. He looked small. He tried to speak, to offer the apology he had been rehearsing. "Kaylee, I am so—" I held up my hand. "I was not there for that. I'm not here for an apology. Dad, apologies are just noise. I'm here for the signal, for the repair." He stared at me, confused. "You want to fix this?" I asked, my voice as clinical as the one I had used in the hall. "You want to undo what you let happen?" "Yes," he whispered, "more than anything." "Then here are the terms," I said. I set my conditions like an engineer calibrating a broken system. "First, you will make a formal, public statement, not to me, to the town, to the ledger. You will admit your complicity. You will state that you knew about the atmosphere of deceit, and you chose silence. You will not make excuses." He swallowed, his eyes dropping to the coffee cup. "Okay." "Second," I said, "you will go to therapy. You will find a real qualified doctor, and you will find out why you are a man who says not now when his daughter is attacked. You will find out why you chose a comfortable lie over a hard truth." His hand was shaking. "Yes. And third," I said, leaning forward, "you will make restitution. You lived off her. You benefited from the money she stole. You will sell that house. I know the bank has it. You will sell your assets, and you will personally, with your own name, repay every dollar that is missing from that fund. You will make the choir whole." I expected him to argue, to plead poverty, to say it was her debt, not his. He sat in silence for a full minute, looking out the window at the frozen lake. Then he nodded. "Yes," he said. His voice was firm, clear. That is fair. I promise you, Kaylee, I will." It was the first time in my life he had ever said anything true. I stood up. "Goodbye, Dad. Send me the receipts." I left him in the diner. I had one more stop. I drove back, not to the city, but to Rivermont, to the mansion. The for sale sign was huge. Bank owned, stamped across it in red. The curated landscaping was already growing weeds. The house looked dead. I parked at the curb. I walked up the stone path, and there it was, on the porch, left behind by the bank assessors, was one of Lila's favorite decorations, a 3-foot-tall hollow plastic angel, its gold paint wings peeling, its face a mask of idiotic, empty serenity. I picked it up. It was weightless. I took a luggage tag from my bag and a black marker from my glove compartment. I wrote 2 words on the tag. Empty. Returning. I tied the tag around the angel's hollow neck and placed it neatly in front of the locked door. I walked back to my car, got in, and drove away. The sound of my mother's music box, which I had left on the passenger seat, faintly audible over the engine. I am back in the control booth, but it is not the Rivermont Civic Hall. 1 year later, Christmas Eve. We are back in the church. The old stone sanctuary is full, every pew packed, but the atmosphere is not the same. It is not the brittle, see and be seen social performance of Lila's gala. The air is cold. It smells of real pine boughs and old hymnals. It is quiet. It is reverent. I am not a guest. I am not an infiltrator. I am once again the volunteer audio and lighting engineer. Ace is here, too. He's sitting 2 feet away from me, running the main audio mix. He grunted when I arrived. "You again. Try not to break anything." It was the highest compliment he was capable of giving. The entire system has been rebuilt. My pro bono work, on behalf of Oralis Systems, was my first official act with the new, independent board. The church now has a state-of-the-art sound system and a simple, elegant lighting rig. And above the choir, where Lila's giant screen once hung, there is a simple, white canvas. Mrs. Davies, the choir conductor, steps up to the podium. The church goes silent. I look at my watch. 8:41 p.m. I rest my hand on the main lighting fader. I have a single cue, a single sequence, programmed. Mrs. Davies raises her arms. I watch the second hand on my monitor. 8:41 and 59 seconds. I push the fader. At the exact second the clock ticks over, 8:42 p.m., two things happen. Mrs. Davies gives the downbeat, and the lead soprano opens her mouth, and my cue fires. A single, pure, white light hits the soprano, and on the white canvas screen, a simple line of black text appears. Accompaniment budget, $412, paid to Rivermont Community Orchestra. The soprano sings the first note of O Holy Night, the same note, the same moment, the note that had been the soundtrack to my father dropping his glass. A year later. The note is not a prelude to chaos, it is a key. Unlocking the truth. As the orchestra joins in, a new line fades in on the screen. Sheet music and binders. $820. Paid to Harmon's Music Supply. This is the new transparency. Mr. Abernathy and the new board agreed. The Year in Review video is no longer a vanity project. It is a live, running ledger. As the children sing, the town watches, in real time, exactly where their money has gone, every dollar, every cent. Riser rental, $300. Paid to Rivermont High School. Scholarship fund contribution, $17,455. Transferred to new trust account. The signal is clean. There is no noise. I let my eyes scan the audience. I can see them from the darkness of my booth. I see Mara Albright, in the second row, her phone in her lap, but she is not recording. She is just watching. Her follow-up story. The Rivermont Reckoning, 1 year later, is already on the front page of the ledger. And in the third row, on the aisle, my father, Harold Johnston, he is wearing a simple wool sweater. He is alone. The seat next to him is conspicuously, painfully empty. He is not looking at the stage. He is not looking at the screen with its list of honest transactions. Transactions he, from the sale of the bank-owned mansion and his own liquidated assets, had personally paid to restore. He is looking at me. His gaze is fixed on the small, dark window of the control booth. He is not smiling. He is not crying. He is just present. He is bearing witness. He is serving his penance, in silence, in the third row. I hold his gaze for a second. A flat, neutral acknowledgement. He nods. Once, a small, pained gesture. I look back at my control board. Lila's chair is empty. She is not here. She will not be here. Her trial was short. The evidence, my evidence, was overwhelming. The signatures, the bank records, the state had offered her a deal. Faced with prison time for felony embezzlement, she accepted. There was no jail time. It was a white-collar crime, in a town that still, despite everything, hated a public mess more than the crime itself. But her sentence was, for her, a death, a 10-year ban on serving on any board, financial or charitable, a 10-year prohibition from holding any position of fiduciary trust. She was barred, by law, from ever handling anyone's money but her own. She was legally, officially, stripped of her power. Her name was removed from every plaque. She had been, in the language of my world, completely and totally erased from the mix. The music swells. The choir is singing with a power I have never heard. They are not singing for donors. They are singing because they can. I look at the donor wall. The old bronze and wood monstrosity from the Civic Hall is gone. In the narthex of the church, there is a new one. It is simple, engraved glass. The names on it are not just the town's elite. The first name is Harold Johnston, for his restitution. The second is Auralis Systems, for the pro bono installation, and then the names of the choir members themselves, the name of the print shop owner, the name of Mrs. Davies, the name of Ace Calder, and at the very bottom, in small, clean letters, the custodial staff of the Rivermont Community Church. The wall is no longer a list of money. It is a list of work. On the screen, a new item fades in. over the music. The Elizabeth Johnston Memorial Scholarship for Audio Engineering, a $5,000 grant for one Rivermont High School student who wants to study sound. Not just music, sound. The truth of it, it was my father's one and only request, paid for with the last of his money. The final note of "O Holy Night" hangs in the air, a perfect crystalline sine wave. The silence that follows is not the silence of shock. It is the silence of completion. The applause is thunderous. It is real. I fade the lights to black. Mrs. Davies takes a bow. The children, beaming, take their bows. Mara finds me as the lights come up for intermission. "It's a hell of a story, Kaylee," she says, holding up her phone, which is filming. "A hell of an ending. The town's changed. The town is just correct," I say. "The system is balanced." "What do you want to say to them?" she asks. "To everyone who watched this? Who read the story?" I look past her, at the audience, at the families, laughing, talking, stretching. It is a normal Christmas Eve. I step out of the booth, into the light. I am just a woman in a dark blue pantsuit. "Just," I say, and I have to clear my throat. "Just thank you. Thank you for listening. Not just with your ears. Thank you for listening to the truth." Mrs. Davies, overhearing, comes up to me. "Kaylee, the second half. Joy to the world. Will you conduct it? Please, you've earned it." The choir children are watching, their faces hopeful. I look at her hand, holding the baton. I think of Lila's hand, raised in the garage. I think of her, grabbing the microphone. I smile, a small, real smile, and I shake my head. "No, thank you, Mrs. Davies," I say. "My place is here, in the booth. I just make sure the signal is clean." Her face is not disappointed. It is understanding. She nods and goes back to her choir. The final piece begins, and a new group of singers walks onto the stage. It's the custodial staff, the men and women in their blue work shirts, the ones who had cleaned up Lila's broken glass, the ones who had swept up the glitter. Mrs. Davies has them on the risers, and when the choir hits the final chorus, she points to them. They sing the high harmony, the descant. Their voices are not trained, but they are high and strong and true. They are the sound of the foundation, the sound of the work, and they soar above everyone. The entire audience, as one, rises to their feet, a standing ovation. I push the faders, all of them. I bring up every light in the house, a flood of clean, pure, white, no amber gels, no sickly warmth, just the truth. Ace, beside me, hits a button. From the ceiling, small, white paper flakes begin to fall over the stage. Paper snow. He looks at me and gives me that one, single, nicotine-stained grin. "Merry Christmas, Johnston," he says. I leave them there, in the light, in the paper snow, in the sound of the applause. I slip out the side door of the church, my work complete. The cold air hits my face. It's real, and it is snowing. Soft, silent, perfect flakes, drifting down from a black sky. My phone buzzes in my pocket. I pull it out. A text message, an email, forwarded. It's from a recruiter at a major broadcast network. They'd read Mara's follow-up piece. They had seen my name. Oralis Systems. "Dear Ms. Johnston," it reads, "we are deeply impressed by your work in systems integration and signal integrity. We have an opening for a senior broadcast engineer. Effective immediately. We would like to talk." I stand in the snow, under the halo of an old-fashioned street lamp. I smile. I get in my car. I drive home, in my apartment. The crystal music box my father gave me sits on my shelf. It is not in a dusty bin. It is clean. It catches the light from the street, the hollow. Plastic Angel is gone. I sit on my sofa, the silence of my own home wrapping around me. I pick up my phone. I send one text, to Ace. "Next year, same choir, no secrets." My phone pings, almost immediately. You bring the server, he writes back. I'll bring the coffee. From the street below, I hear the sound, the deep, resonant chime of the city's cathedral bell. It rings, once, twice, all the way to 12, midnight, Christmas, and then silence. A perfect, clean, absolute silence. And for the first time in a long, long time, it sounds like peace. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm curious. Where are you all listening from? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and if you can, support us by hitting that hype button. It really helps get these stories out to more people who need to hear them.